Welcome to It's a Broker Thing podcast, brought to you by Bluestone Home Loans. Each episode will dive into market updates, practical insights, and real stories for brokers who want to stay ahead, build stronger relationships, and grow their business. Let's dive in. Amongst a backdrop of rising interest rates, a cost of living crisis, and a housing supply shortage, the government has handed down one of the most controversial budgets in many a year. In today's episode, we thought we'd try and unpack some of the impacts of the budget and how it's potentially going to impact on the housing market and lenders moving forward. Joining me today is Richard Chesworth, Head of Specialist Lending at Bluestone Home Loans, and Aaron Taylor, Head of Non-Standard Lending from Bluestone Home Loans. Guys, thank you and welcome again to It's a Broker Thing.
It's good to be here, Tony, and what a topic we got today.
Cross your legs.
Well, we're going to take the gloves off, and there's no net today. We're just going to see where this takes us. But I'm going to open it up off the bat. Really controversial changes in the budget that's going to impact housing. We've seen capital gains tax changes. We've seen negative gearing removed from existing dwellings. Superannuation, no longer limited recourse borrowing, which is near and dear to your heart, Richard. But I'm confused because the rhetoric that we're being told is this is being done to help first home buyers. But every way I add things up is investors, which are typically better off than first home buyers, are going to move to lower value properties with higher yields or new builds to continue to take advantage of the negative gearing and capital gains. How is that going to help first home buyers?
Tony, I think it's a tough question to answer, and I don't think anybody's going to really have a positive one for you there because, quite frankly, there isn't a good answer to it. I think we've had the suggestion that the first home buyers that go to auction won't have to be competing with as many investors anymore, but the reality is what first home buyers are actually going to an auction. We're going to see investors pivot into this new build space, which has largely been dominated historically by the first home buyers, and all of a sudden they're going to be pushed out. So I don't really have the answers, Chesy.
Yeah, it's a difficult one to answer. Does it come back to this overall affordability question? Does it come back to the growth we've seen in the Australian property market, the added reliance on mum and dad, the separation in wealth gap? You've got areas where people actually can't afford to move. For example, to Sydney. Younger people, first home buyers, people can't afford to move to Sydney because of the prices. However, look at all the changes we're going to see at the moment. Perth for years has gone through the roof, but off a very slow base. The growth in the property market, and I'll say it, I was out of it for a number of years, for about 8 years, and to step back in was quite challenging. So is it just a first homer situation, or is it a broader affordability question which is being dealt with here?
Are these changes not an admission that we just can't fix the real underlying issue, which is supply, and so we'll try and attack the demand side of the equation?
The supply front, and I'm actually going to quote Alan Kohler here. He was on the news the other week, one of the programs. So I love watching the ABC. There you go. It frames me a bit further there. And he was talking about the actual amount of build going on and the amount of new builds that have happened. And I think the argument's been, it's kind of, we've got population growth here and we've got build here. But then the way he framed it, on average, there's 2.4 people that live in every house. And so if it's linked to kind of increased supply and to manage demand, he said, actually, on that level, we'd actually have had to lift migration to keep up with the supply. So, look, it's I think that's a numbers game as well, maybe with an economist playing, but it's a different light to put on things. It's also, I think, utilization of property. We've got the rental market so tight. We've got a whole lot of short-term rental out there as well. So it's it's where that the market's shifted to in general, which I think is a bigger issue to free up supply, free up demand. Is that so I don't have all the answers there, but.
But we don't seem to be doing anything to free up supply. And I've spoken before. We seem to be incentivising first home buyers, and I'll get to that because I think there's some real dangers attached to that particular piece, particularly in light of these changes. But we talk about and provide lip service to asking older people that the family's moved out, and it may be a couple living in a 4-bedroom house, to downsize, but we don't do anything to help those people. And in fact, we actually penalise them sometimes. And I've spoken about my parents' situation that did this last year, got no support, had to pay some stamp duty, but actually then lost their medical benefits because they made a little profit on it. And there just doesn't seem to be incentives to actually address the supply issue to me.
Yeah. And that's right. Look, being through that and also wearing another hat, and I've always been very active in the self-managed super fund lending world. I've had large exposure in the reverse mortgage space as well. But yeah, the incentive for people to downsize, and that provides further liquidity in the market. If I downsize my home, there's a couple of good options there. I've got my downsizer contributions I can make to super, up to $300,000 per person. But there's timings there. But in saying that, the cost as well, as you said, stamp duties and the like, there's so many limitations. There's not the incentive and the attractiveness for people to make that shift, which is actually, not just financially, but sometimes better for their well-being to be able to live in a more manageable home one way or another.
Oh, absolutely. And, I know our circumstances with mum and dad, they've never been happier. And so it's a real tick there. But I think there's a lot of people that hold off because there is this fear, and it was a major step for them, moving out of a place they lived in for 53 years. Now they're there. Love it, but I think we should be doing more to address issues like that, cutting red tape, getting more places built and people into those.
We've got to, because we have an aging population. And the way we're going, the shift from people in the workforce compared to people over the retirement age is growing and growing and growing. We need to be able to manage that better. And part of that is potentially downsizing to free up the equity in the home. Yes, you lose age pension, but you have more liquidity there to support yourself in retiring years as well. But it adds that liquidity to the market.
I think you're also talking about one side of the market, which is the aging population and the downsizing. But you flip it around and you look at the first home buyers, and they're looking at a market that it's hard to get into. And then there's costs associated with upsizing if they ever want to grow, their family. They're a young couple, they're thinking about having kids. They have to buy in at an entry point that is ridiculous for them, because if they ever sell that property, they're going to have to then pay another lot of stamp duty to buy into their second place, as well as the associated costs with selling their first place. So for young couples looking at stepping into the property ladder, they're trying to go up and above, where historically maybe they could have, having lived and worked in New Zealand, with no stamp duty, it's a completely different ball game, because for young customers, they can buy in at a level that actually suits them in their current situation, rather than trying to buy into a property market that actually doesn't suit their current situation. I think that's a whole nother piece of the puzzle that doesn't really get addressed in Australia.
It's interesting though, because may need to fact check this, but the ACT has moved to an area, kind of stepped away from the stamp duty on purchases, or they're if not completed, they're well down the path of doing that. So you don't have that hurdle in stepping into the new property.
Let's talk about first home buyers for a minute. So, tens of thousands of first home buyers have been encouraged to enter the market through highly leveraged, highly geared 95% loans through the government scheme. The most conservative estimates of these tax changes that have been put through is a 5% drop in property prices in the medium term. Some have gone as high as 20%. Haven't we just put a whole bunch of first home buyers into highly geared properties that are now in negative equity territory? What does the government say to them?
I've seen it before, not in the same process with the government assistant to buy. But I remember back in 1996, I lived in Canberra at the time. There's a change in government. Everyone was buying, first homes were borrowing that 95%. There was that many redundancies in the public service when the government changed that there wasn't actually enough people to actually process the redundancy payments at the time. But the property market went backwards. And negative equity. Negative equity is a real issue. Of course, your purchase isn't a short-term thing. It's a longer-term play. But to be in a position where this has been incentivized through policy is a concern. I also think we've seen it time after time where government intervention one way or another into a free market tilts and blurs the market, whether it's first homeowner schemes, and look, I actually think in the last election there was no win there because the other option was, okay, that the other party is saying accessing super to buy your home, buy your first home and the like. These are all inflationary measures. Incentives and first homeowner schemes, basically almost like a second homeowner scheme because it can push the market a bit to help the next person go into the next level. But at the moment, with all the other changes, it's a bit of a perfect storm.
But we've just spent the last few years with them opening up the gates, increasing the thresholds on income and property prices to encourage more people to step in there, in ensuring that there's even more first home buyers that could set themselves up into this position. And now we're seeing, them setting up a market to potentially have a crash of, 5, 10, even more %, who knows? And we're seeing the banks set aside money in preparation for these negative equity losses. Like the market shifts haven't even started to account for what they've done in the first change, and now they're shifting again.
It goes even a little bit further, and I do need to declare that Bluestone hasn't participated in these schemes, but a responsible response to a first home buyer getting in a little bit of trouble with a highly geared place is to maybe you need to rent it out for a little while, move back with mum and dad. But the way the scheme's structured, actually doing that puts the scheme and the insurance for the lender at risk. So it's a really difficult situation.
Not everyone's in a position to move back with mum and dad.
True.
I grew up 3 hours from the closest city. I moved to the city to live and work. You leave your safety
Absolutely.
net. You leave your safety net, and so if you've then been offered the opportunity to get onto the property ladder with a 5% scheme, this idea that you're going to be protected by the government, they've got your back, only to be turned around and realise they're not there.
I just have a real concern for people that have gone into this scheme, and I hope we've done the thinking. I hope we're prepared to be able to support them, and what we don't end up is with a whole heap of fire sales on the market.
Yeah,
but it does come down again to the overall affordability issue. How much of the household income has been going into service loans, because we've seen an enormous growth in property values. Has that been skewed as the current changes which are going through, because they've been signed off with that added sweetener of Resi SMSF lending being banned. We haven't seen the changes yet, but overall, will it? Has it been the right shift? Is it too fast? Is it I've always had a view that a change like this potentially shouldn't be just bang overnight, rip the Band-Aid off hard, to limit impact. It may have been over a 10-year period to bring things in, but
with consultation that goes through with the industry, and I think that's a huge part of what's been missed here.
And it's been universally criticised You know, there's not a hell of a lot of support there. And I want to jump on to what we think the impacts might be. Before we just move off from this supply-demand side of things, maybe a little bit wacky, a little bit out there, but for all sides of politics, novel idea. Build some places.
But Tony, you touched on it earlier, right? You know, why are we not addressing that, you know, that elephant in the room that is the supply issues? But the problem actually really is much bigger than anybody really wants to talk about. You know, we talk about the approval process to get places off the ground in the first place. Then the developments waiting on power and water supply, you know, the roads themselves. And then you've got the skilled labour to actually get this work done. Have we got enough in the country to be able to build it? And then the supply chain issues that we've faced over the last, 6 months plus, the last, 5 to 10 years, we've seen issues prop up every now and then. And it just creates this turmoil and a mess for anybody that thinks they want to build a home. You know, the supply chain issues are a huge part of it. And then all the way through to the planning processes and getting the first slab, the slab actually down on the ground. It's crazy.
I read an article earlier today that 22 departments get touched to get a development approval up. It's just mayhem.
Yeah. So, thousands of homes waiting to be approved. Customers sitting there waiting for an approval. And only to be sitting there waiting while we face into a crisis that's inflated their costs hugely. And then they turn around, they want to build a home, and the costs are going up. And they can't afford it anymore.
PVC piping's gone up by 30%.
Yeah.
That's your drain pipes, everything like that, your plumbing, the whole lot. That's just one part.
Who's going to wear that cost? Because is it going to be the customer at the bottom end, or is it going to be the builder in the middle trying to get the materials to get a property off the line? Because the reality is someone's going to have to wear it, and who knows? It's probably going to be the taxpayer.
So let's shift away. Last comment. I really think this is one of the great betrayals of the Australian people in these changes, but it's a reality. We've got to live with it. We've got to adapt to it. Now, I'm bullish as to how markets do adapt to these sorts of things, and we've seen it over time. But in your spaces of specialist lending, of SMSF, how do you see this playing out?
I think in the specialist space, we're starting to see the flow through effects of the inflation. The impact to households has been very tough over the last few years. Having to go through very cheap interest rates and still facing into inflationary pressure, only to have the RBA turn around and increase interest rates in the back end, which is then passing through extra costs through to them at the front end. We're now seeing a market that's being turned on its head and policies getting changed. Within a matter of weeks, we're seeing property values drop. Mum and dads that are sitting there with homes that are facing into negative equity. I think the specialist space all of a sudden is really going to grow. That we're going to be looking for solutions left, right, and centre. In the construction space, that more complex, customer or investor over the last few years, that they might have been looking to go into that space. Now all of a sudden they might be priced out. We're going to have a hell of a lot more customers shift into that space. You've got first home buyers focused always as building their dream home. And now you've got investors jumping in and pushing them out. So I think there's going to be a lot more complexity in the specialist and specialty lender space. I don't know, with Chesy, your space.
Oh, the SMSF world! Wow, it's been turned on its head in a matter of days. It was overnight, and I think
we should put a clock on Chesy here though, because keep it tight.
Yeah, but I look at it. I think where a broker needs to be looking is to a lender who can support them with knowledge through this time of change. It is change, and I was saying. I think when the budget changes came through, I remember having a coffee with Tony the next morning, yourself, and I said, look, when there's change, opportunity comes from that, and then I was having to say those same words to myself last week, and there is opportunity that comes from this, but from a lender's point of view, and for brokers, you should be aligning yourself with a lender with the knowledge to support you and work with you through the situation, the position, and you want value. So value over price and the like, because everyone's going to be competitive, but value is key today, and consistency to deliver. So that's from a business point of view. But the opportunity is, people have to shift. I think, I've always said that commercial's a must in the SMSF lending space. Resi's been nice to have. It's disappointing to see it's come to where it has. There's been a number of cases over the years seeking change. The Financial Systems Inquiry was looking to abolish it in 2014, maybe 15. And there's another story there because you've kept me on a short time frame here. But there are potential proposed changes there, which could have come in to soften the market. Unfortunately, we've seen it go so far, and I'll probably touch on later there. I think some of the, someone else's words stick in my mind when I say this, but it's not so much an SMSF issue. It's been a behavioural issue in the market. We'll touch on that hopefully a bit later.
I think the other side to this budget is the tax space. And we're already facing into the end of the most recent financial year with over $50 billion outstanding tax. That's what the ATO is chasing. And all of a sudden we've got these shifts and changes to, not only capital gains, but also trust distributions and other pieces that are stepped into the market over the last year, changes from the ATO that are going to shift the way that tax is collected. And the customers are going to be facing into that in a huge way. So all of a sudden, accountants are going to be seeing that on their desk even more, I think. And for brokers, it's really about making sure they've got a safety net set up around them. Who do they reach out to when they've got a customer that's got credit issues, or a customer that's, sitting in that first home buyer space, or a customer that's got tax debt, customer that's got an existing SMSF loan? Do they know where to turn to? Do they know how to help? Who's their accountant referral partners? Who are their financial planners? Who's helping them with tax debt? Who are the lenders in their existing portfolio that they can turn to for assistance? That relationship with the BDM, once again, becoming a really, really front of mind issue.
So again, despite governments trying to discourage wealth generation, it's never been more important to be close to a lender, to be close with a lender, your lender BDM as a broker, to see through the long term. And I'm bullish that investors will find a way moving forward, but there's a degree of uncertainty that we need to tread through at the moment, and keep the faith. Guys, we've run out of time again. Thank you for joining us, Ches, Aaron. Always great catching up, and thank you for joining us again on It's a Broker Thing. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. That's a wrap of this episode of It's a Broker Thing, brought to you by Bluestone Home Loans. We love sharing ideas that help you stay ahead, because backing brokers, well, it's a Bluestone thing. Hit subscribe and join us next time for more insights and stories that keep you in the know. This podcast is for general education only and isn't financial, legal or tax advice. Guest views are their own. Bluestone accepts no liability for errors or how you use this information.